Hello everyone, welcome to a new video for Bitcoin price prediction based on Elliott Wave analysis. This is a deep analysis for Bitcoin. We're gonna see the weekly and the all-time history, of course, until the 15-minute chart, the micro level for Bitcoin, and to see and assess, of course, the price action, where are we heading and what is the highest possibility. Starting with the all-time history here, where we have our cycles there and our parabolic curve here. We can see clearly that our first impulse in the first cycle has been finished as a wave 1. We got a wave 2 as a deep zigzag, wave 3 followed by an impulse for the second cycle, and another correction ABC, of course, zigzag for a wave 4, and a wave 5 also with the third cycle here, finishing, of course, a wave A or a wave 1. By all means, you have finished here an impulse 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. Very nice impulse, finishing, of course, here wave 1 or wave A without invalidation, and a very nice, of course, structure and, of course, respected rules as per Elliott Wave. Now, after this impulse, the 5 waves, wave A or wave 1, we got a deep correction again, of course, which is your wave 2 or your wave B here. Has a potential wave A, B, and a C. We're looking for higher, or a wave 1, 2, and then wave 3, 4, and a 5 continuation toward the upside. After this correction, we saw a massive move from Bitcoin impulsively again for a new impulse, a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, finished 5 waves impulsively, perfect within the structure, and we saw, of course, 3 waves down, 3 waves up, taking the all-time high again, of course, in a wave B as an expanding flat for the first time in history for Bitcoin, where we saw, of course, a correction or a bear market as a corrective market in an expanding flat, which is, of course, a very special bear market, unlikely for every single bear market that we got before, which represent a very deep zigzag, as we saw, of course, before. ABC, ABC, and then A, B, and a C. Of course, very deep zigzags that we got, of course, with the previous bear market. But for this bear market, currently we have an expanding flat, A, B, and a C. The expanding flat is a little bit less aggressive than a very deep zigzag. However, the wave C of an expanding flat is the most aggressive move, which it is, of course, very likely that we are currently in the wave C, and of course it is still unfinished, and it might continue, of course, until it hit the target around the 70k here, 71k, 1.618, taken from the A to the B to the C there by taking the low, especially that this target is in confluence with a very strong hold area. Technically here, we're talking that the price has formed a very rigid and solid area where, of course, Bitcoin will face a lot of troubles here to break it toward the downside. We're gonna see, of course, something pushing for higher and continuation toward the upside, because, of course, after this correction, which is in confluence here, we might see, of course, a push toward the upside within a wave 3, since, of course, this represents your wave 1 as an impulse, A, B, and a C, the expanding flat as a wave 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. We're looking for wave 3. 1.618 is your target as a common target, taken, of course, from the wave 1, and supposing that we're gonna have, of course, a target as a wave 2 over there around the 70k or 68k, and then pushing for the 1.618, which is a minimum target here, 218k for Bitcoin for the next cycle. So that would be a very nice opportunity from the 68k to the 218k here for Bitcoin. Can be, of course, a very massive move, and we're talking about here at least the 173%, in case, of course, that we get this cycle unfolding, of course, for something very, very bullish. Yep, so these are the possibility for the bullish on the all-time history. I'm still looking, of course, to finish up this correction. Now, this correction can finish, of course, the wave C as an impulse or as a diagonal 5 waves. All what it matters here is a 5 waves, complete 5 waves, finishing, of course, in this area as diagonal or as an impulse. It doesn't matter. The wave C has to be done and exactly hitting this target, and then start to push toward the upside. Now, before doing this and continuing, of course, with a bullish scenario on the lower time frame or also the bearish one, I would like to talk about the all-time history bearish scenario, which it is a possibility, of course, but very low possibility, where you have a zigzag over there, another zigzag over there, and an X in between. So this very strong hold area here is an X, of course, as a bridge between the W, X, and a Y, meaning transferring this into a three waves, complete three waves toward the upside, where you have already three waves before, and you're looking for a very deep wave C toward the downside, which of course it can bring us back, of course, to 15K as it was before this bull run, which is very, very low possibility, of course, guys. To call this scenario, we need to break this stronghold area. By breaking this stronghold area, which is the wave X, in case this is the case, but yeah, if we break it, then we start to call something very bearish. So we need to break this blue zone, and of course continuation toward the downside, which it can reveal something very, very bearish as a very deep ABC here. It can be a running flat, even ABC, without reaching the low. Since it is an expanding flat here, but it can turn into a running flat by finishing, of course, a stronger 5 waves toward the downside like this. And even without taking the low, it can, of course, start to push for higher prices. However, if this happens, this will open, of course, much higher possibility for the wave A rather than a wave 1. And that means, of course, you are in a wave A, running flat as a wave B, and then pushing for higher in a wave C. Yep, so these are the possibility. Very low possibility for the bearish scenario, higher possibility for the 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5 here to unfold. Of course, I'm still watching this area on the all-time history. If we move to the daily here and we start with the channeling, of course, for the channeling, we can see, of course, the previous bull run where we saw, of course, a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. You can see clearly that this, of course, impulse has exited the base channel over there, as you can see. The base channel, once the price leaves the base channel, that is considered directly, of course, a wave 3, especially if you see a very sideways range here as a corrective channel. We can see, of course, the corrective channel in blue here, which it is your wave 4. Now, to make sure that we continue this impulse, you would like to see, first of all, that the price break the channel here, the corrective channel, and breaking the base channel one more time, and then bringing, of course, the price inside, of course, the acceleration channel, as we can see here, pushing inside it, of course, at least to hit the middle line, as we saw, of course, for Bitcoin. Now, leaving the acceleration channel after a wave 5, that means, of course, a signal that we're done here. We're done with this impulse. The impulse is finished, and we are starting a very massive correction here. And as you can see also that the price couldn't later exit, of course, the base channel. It couldn't do this because, of course, it doesn't belong to the impulse anymore. It belongs to a wide correction here, ABC expanding flat. Now, in the wave C of this expanding flat, we are looking for an impulse toward the downside here. In this impulse, we saw, of course, another base channel here, and that because, of course, we are looking at an impulse. Once you have an impulse 1, 2 here, you can lay down your base channel, and as you can see in red, and we see, of course, this massive wave 3 pushing toward the downside. However, if you want to count this wave 3, you cannot count this as a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, and that because the wave 4 interfere with the zone 1, which is not allowed. Therefore, you have to consider this as a double 1, 2, and then wave 3 toward the downside. However, I have also a problem within this wave 3 as an impulse. So if we are impulsive here as a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, you can see that the wave 3 is the shortest between the 1 and the 5. And that is not allowed also as an impulse, which turning this into something potentially corrective. And we gotta be careful with this one because, of course, it can be very, very corrective. But of course, we're gonna see it a little bit much more clearer on the micro level, because on the micro level, you can divide this in different way. And we're gonna see this. Now, what is very interesting is that, of course, the price has exited the base channel. And we can see that the price is still ranging in this area. However, the ranging of that price here is, of course, in 5 waves leading diagonal again, which signaling a potential ABC at least here, which it can hit again the base channel, the old one, and then pushing for lower later on. However, if this happens and we see, of course, higher prices, even reaching this level, which is around the 99K, which is, of course, should be here your 1, 2, right? 1, 2, 3, and this is your wave 4. If the wave 4 interfere with the zone area, that means also total invalidation of this impulse, especially within the signal there with the short wave 3. It might, of course, turn all of it here as a simply finished ABC here. By all means, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5 expanding diagonal, and this expanding diagonal might be here a zigzag. Yeah, so because of the zigzags that you got for wave 3, potentially also you can call this zigzag, and of course this will turn it somehow as a big, of course, expanding diagonal as an A, B, and a C here, and then pushing for higher. Even if this is an impulse, that works perfectly, because you need, of course, an impulse for wave A, B, and a C. Of course, internally those can be zigzags as a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5 expanding diagonal. And by all means, this will turn, of course, this as a potential wave 1. And then, of course, you might get a very large wave 2, and then 3, 4, and a 5, meaning the bear market might continue as expected in a wave C. Nothing has changed, guys, but only, of course, the psychology, how we reach the target. Rather than continuing aggressively with a very impulsive, aggressive wave 3 here, it might shift, of course, into a diagonal there, ending diagonal, finishing a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5 at the 1.618, 67 or 68K, as, of course, required in this area also as a support. And we might start to see, of course, something to push for higher sooner or later. So this is what I'm expecting now for Bitcoin, especially, guys, that the timing taken here for wave 4 in comparison as alternation for wave 2, it doesn't fit anymore. This is a very, very long time based on the wave 2, meaning something wrong is going on in this impulse. And it is time to think, of course, differently here, and to think, of course, in something pushing for higher, and not necessarily to be bullish, meaning taking a new all-time high, but it can be definitely something pushing for higher as corrective, and then continue the trend toward the downside later on, but in different pattern, which is, of course, the ending diagonal. Now, if we want to see, of course, the label of Elliott Wave here, we can see, of course, the most common possibility is an ABC here. The wave C is unfolding as a 1, 2, 3. The wave 3 is unfinished. And if this is your wave 4 of double 1, 2, well, I doubt it so much, guys. Again, because of the timing, I'm going to zoom in. And because, of course, of this wave 3 over there, there is a problem with it. It doesn't fit anymore. And also, I see that this can be very likely, of course, an ABC zigzag, finished, of course, as an expanding diagonal wave C, and this leading diagonal as a second signal as well, that something might push for higher sooner or later. We might see something, of course, at least pushing for higher in an ABC. By all means, it might turn into this scenario. This scenario, which is your diagonal here, ending diagonal, where we might see, of course, this push toward the upside still, and taking the invalidation, total invalidation of a potential 1, 2, 3 here, and then 4 and a 5. So by taking anyway the 99K670, that means, of course, very, very, very convenient that, of course, we have to start to think in diagonal and not in an impulse. Yeah, so because the impulse is invalidated. And based on the time, it is already, and again, the signal there, and of course, the diagonal given over there. Those are all signals, guys, for something pushing for higher prices. And that's why I'm very convinced with this scenario. Now, in case that we are very, very bullish there, and we finish, of course, a correction, don't forget that this can be just a 3 waves, as we mentioned, ABC. If this is the case, well, you have to consider a potential here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5 leading diagonal, ABC wave 2, perfect target hit, no 886 taken, and that means, of course, still keeping the possibility high for, of course, pushing something for a new all-time high. Now, what it can be the case scenario here? The case scenario that it can be is unfinished bull run, meaning a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5 might still be unfolding. The wave 5 can be an ending diagonal, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5, or even it can be something pushing for higher, meaning that is an extreme and ultimate bullish scenario where you might be here in a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. So the wave 5 is unfolding here as an impulse 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. But guess what will happen after, if this will happen, of course, as a very massive impulse here, this will transform to this to double 1-2s here, double 1-2s, and having a 1-2-1-2 wave 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, and a 5 continuation toward the upside. So this is the extreme and ultimate bullish here scenario, but of course it's too early to call it. I would say in case we see, of course, higher prices here and taking the all-time high, well, we have to, of course, test a wave 5 as an ending diagonal first, and of course catching the potential targets for a wave 5. If broken, then okay, we call a wave 3, massive wave 3, and that of course will turn these to double 1-2s, and very likely that we are in a very massive wave 3 toward the upside. But of course, after reaching this area, and of course after breaking it, we can call this scenario, not now, of course, guys. So this is regarding the possibilities on the daily. The highest possibility for me right now is still, of course, in between the middle solution here between, of course, the two scenarios, very, very bullish and very, very bearish. I'm looking, of course, for the middle possibility, which is, of course, an ending diagonal, especially that the signals has been given already. Yeah, so that something has to push for higher, and it can, of course, simply invalidate anything impulsive, but it might turn it into a diagonal. So this is the most and the highest possibility for me right now. Ending diagonal in a wave C, expanding a flat. Of course, the target's still the same. Nothing has changed. Only the timing and the pattern has changed for this bear market. If we dive deeper on the 2 hours chart here, so for the 2 hours chart, what I'm expecting over there, after of course this push toward the downside, a 1, 2, 3, if we are still in a wave 4, well, that is a horrible wave 4 regarding the wave 2 over there as alternation. And that means, of course, very likely that we are here in a leading diagonal, 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. The W, X, and a Y, it never ends, right? So, of course, we have a very complex structure here, definitely. And starting from there, you can see a zigzag, right? Another zigzag over there, and another zigzag over there to take the low. And this make it a very, very complex structure. And of course, and we continue to be very complex even after all. I didn't saw any kind of 1, 2 here, but what I see here is a complete W, X, and a Y, and the wave Y is unfolding here as a triangle, A, B, C, D, and a E, and very likely to push toward the upside after it. So we're gonna still see a lot of sideways here to finish this triangle for a wave Y, of course W, X, and a Y, and then of course pushing for higher again as of course an A, B, and a C as a zigzag, of course, for Bitcoin here. And this will finish up, of course, a wave 1 or wave 2, but very likely it is a wave B, especially with a complex structure. 1-to-1 FIB level 98K700 can be your next target when we push for higher here, of course, for Bitcoin after finishing this triangle, of course. Yep, so these are the possibilities right now for Bitcoin on the 15-minute chart. Also, as you can see, nothing is impulsive yet. And even if you see here 5 waves, well, nothing yet is very, very impulsive, I would say, especially that we cannot really count something as impulsive after all this complex structure. I would say it is corrective. I would say it is a wave C, and it's gonna take, of course, the 99K very likely, which is, of course, a confirmation that something else is unfolding here as potential diagonal. Final thing I would like to show, of course, is the KGT indicator for Bitcoin. And of course, we can see clearly on the 1-minute chart here how Bitcoin is ranging very, I would say, sideways, and show a very strong balance between the bulls and the bears here. As you can see that we got, of course, several signals for Bitcoin for the bullish there, but of course, directly followed by sell signals and in conversions again, of course, with the price here. However, at the same time right now, where you see, of course, the price pushing for higher as the CVD line opening toward the downside, well, it creates somehow a divergence, but still, of course, showing some weakness, some selling pressure, which it's not gonna be very impulsive. Again, it's gonna be simply sideways. So as explained here, it's gonna be, of course, a long time and in a long range here, and between the battle between bullish and bearish. Yeah? So we're gonna see, of course, this triangle finishing up here, and then of course start to create something toward the upside. And at that time, I would say a very strong divergence will open here. So once we get, of course, finished with this triangle, I believe that a very strong divergence in the CVD line will form over there, and of course the bulls might take lead over there and see something pushing for higher. Yeah, so basically this is what I'm expecting. And of course on the 3-minute chart, you see a convergence here, but also you see that the bullish signal are very strong as well. So they are countering each other's, and of course creating a consolidation. And then, of course, once we finish, because we need a structure, of course, to be finished, which is W, X, and a Y. And this is, of course, what Elliott Wave helps us here to understand when and what to expect next, of course, as a triangle, and then pushing for higher later on. Yep, so these are my expectation for the deep analysis for Bitcoin. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your likes and comments. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.